On this show, I really do try to be honest and forthright with you. And if I get something wrong, I'll tell you that I screwed up, right? And when I get something right, I will take 17 victory laps about being right. Do you guys remember at the start of this show last year, and this is one of the first, it might have actually been the first episode of the show, I was reacting to the fact that there was the word that Bryce Harper wanted a contract extension on the, 13-year deal that he initially signed. And there were these rumors out there. Bryce Harper wants a further commitment from the Phillies. He needs an extension. He needs additional years. And I said, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because he's signed until he's no longer going to be a useful player. I forget what age he'll be at when it ends. I could look. But that's not the point. He's going to be either late 30s, early 40s when the contract is over. And I said, why the hell does he need additional years? Like, why would that even be floated? Like, what's the point? Legitimately, what's the point of extending Bryce Harper? And I said, like, not only do you know that the last few years of the current contract are going to be bad as it stands, why would you extend even further into useless years just for the sake of, like, trying to make him feel better short term? He's getting a lot of money. Now, in fairness, if Bryce had an opt-out last year or the year before, would he have had a deal that eclipsed like what Shohei Ohtani got or Juan Soto got? Maybe not. Maybe closer. And like you can maybe make the argument that if Bryce Harper's playing at an MVP level, that his current contract is an underpay. But man, I got to tell you, I have so many concerns about Bryce Harper and about the way that this team has built this roster expecting Bryce Harper to be an MVP level player, when I just haven't seen it now for over a year. You can go back, right? 2 years. Bryce Harper was a dominant player. You can go back to last year. He had stretches where he was a dominant player. And then injuries started to befall him. And at that point, you had to start looking at the age and you had to start looking at the accumulating injuries over time. And it's very rarely been something that's taken him out for 9 months at a time, 10 months at a time. But the accumulation of the injuries, that's where you start to get worried because, not to make a comparison here, although I did just see Connor Buss put this over here saying, my biggest fear is that the Bryce injury situation is turning into Embiid 2.0. I don't think we're there yet. But what I do think that, I think that the place that we're realistically at with Bryce Harper is that this is a player who does have an injury history. And when you're trying to play through injuries, you're going to overcompensate and you're ultimately going to hurt yourself in another way. Now, in fairness, this season, Harper has hit 258, 9 home runs, 34 RBI. It's by no means been an incredible start to his season. And, even saying start to the season is kind of disingenuous. Now, he's 32 years old. And we all know that there's a certain prime age where you're really supposed to play your best baseball. And then eventually, any athlete, there's going to be that decline. And I do openly wonder if we have gotten to a point now where we've seen the best of Bryce Harper, which, by the way, I'm not saying Bryce Harper is going to be bad. I'm not saying that when Bryce Harper returns from this wrist injury that all of a sudden he's going to be a shell of himself. But I will just note the fact that, there have been some concerning trends with Bryce Harper's play over the last year. And I do think that, one thing that came out of a recent media availability is that he hurt his wrist last year and that his wrist was hurt down the stretch last season. And the Phillies played their last game against the Mets in the playoffs at the very beginning of October. And he said in this media availability that, his wrist took until December for the pain to go away. So if this is a wrist injury, and if it is the same wrist injury, and to the credit of my dear friend Anthony Sanfilippo, who asked the question, he said, is this similar to what you had in the past? And Harper said yes. So if it's the same wrist injury that he had at the end of the 2024 season, and now it has popped up again in 2025, that's a legitimate issue because, all right, first injury, not ideal, but we hear, all right, it was hurting in October. It took until December for it to heal. So you figure a week or a month. Is it 6 weeks? Is it 7 weeks? The Phillies are talking about, he goes on IL. And they're like, oh, maybe it's this 2-week injury. It's probably more likely he's going to miss a full month. So are we talking about getting Bryce Harper back around the trade deadline? Are we talking about getting Bryce Harper back in August? Where exactly are we going with this? Because, again, Bryce Harper didn't have the pop this season. That was a problem of its own, right? That was the thing that I thought was one of the most concerning trends that we saw is that, this lineup as a whole doesn't have a whole lot of pop to it. And when the guy who's your MVP guy, your former MVP player, and a guy that like you truly do rely on to be the most important hitter in this lineup, when that guy doesn't have the pop, it's a legitimate concern. And so that pop hasn't been there this season. We knew about the elbow injury. We all knew that that was going to cause a legitimate problem. And one of the things that he said in the media availability is that the elbow probably didn't hurt the wrist. And he noted that there was like, the drainage, right, coming off the elbow might have affected his wrist. So here you have, once again, a player who maybe came back too early from an injury, a player who tried to gut it out, a player maybe to his own detriment, to his own physical detriment, was trying to get on the field for you because he knows how important he is to the team, but might have actually done more damage to himself. And so you have this elbow injury that he was trying to get himself back from, right, from getting dinged by Spencer Strider. And so you go, all right, he's trying to come back in. He's trying to work through that injury, and probably in doing so exacerbated an injury that may have still been affecting him in this wrist. And so now you're looking at missing him for what I would assume is going to be at least a month, right? So you've already had I don't want to say like a degraded Harper. I don't want to say it's been like a diminished Harper, I think is actually kind of fair. You've had a relatively diminished Bryce Harper in the lineup in the 2025 season, who then took a shot to the elbow, who didn't exactly look comfortable coming back. Yes, he hit a home run up in Toronto, and we were like, all right, cool. The man is back. Elbow injury that may have furthered an issue from last season with a wrist, and now he's out for a month. And then what's going to happen? The Phillies, if they continue the free fall, they are now 1-9 in their last 10 games. If this free fall continues, who's going to feel like they need to come back as fast as possible from injury? Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper at this point, I think, has now shown a propensity for maybe trying to come back a little bit too early from injury. So now what are you talking about? All right, let's say that all things go relatively well. He doesn't miss 6 weeks or 7 weeks or 2 months. He misses a month. So you get Bryce Harper back at the start, somewhere around the first week of July. Okay. By that point, if the Phillies haven't pulled the nose up on this thing, they will effectively be out of the race in the NL East, and they'll probably be in a very precarious position for a wild card. That's how much of a swing, obviously, it is to have Bryce Harper in the lineup versus out of it. That, again, is assuming that some of your important guys in this lineup who are supposed to develop and take another step, like the Stotts and the Bohms, and maybe even the Marshes or the Rojas's of the world, could actually like take a step forward instead of falling on their ass and like giving themselves a concussion, slipping backwards. That would also entail that, like, I don't know, your signing, I can't even call it a big signing. I can't even like be sarcastic enough to say big signing of Max Kepler would, like, I don't know, deliver in some meaningful way for you. If none of those guys turn it around, and if like Nick Castellanos can't somehow revive power that he once had to try to give some pop to this lineup, if they can't do that, this team will be in free fall by July. And then Bryce Harper, is he going to feel that he needs to rush back to try to stabilize things and maybe make that late push for a wild card? Is Bryce Harper then going to go, all right, well, I was going to come back, or I was going to try to rush it, but now I'm going to actually do the right thing for my body? No, I think he's going to try to rush back. And by the way, if in 2 weeks' time, if his IL stint ends and this team really is in free fall, he's going to try to come back into the lineup. And again, you are running the risk of him further hurting himself even worse. Like, it's a legitimate problem. And for whatever reason, there just seems to be a large contingent of this Phillies fan base that is not willing to accept the fact that, like, for better or worse, Bryce Harper's best days may be behind him. And it's not because he is just a diminished player that has, like, somehow lost the ability to hit a fastball. No. The injuries are starting to stack up, and if he doesn't take the requisite amount of time to get healthy, he is going to get himself hurt even worse. And when that starts to happen, and when you start to rush back from injury, and a 2-week injury turns into a month-long injury, or maybe rushing back from that elbow led to the issue with the wrist, now it's a month. Maybe if he had waited another week to come back from the elbow, you're looking at a situation where, like, maybe he doesn't re-injure the wrist, or maybe if he waits 2 weeks coming off the elbow, he's fully healthy, the wrist injury doesn't happen. Now, again, it's a lot of hypotheticals. It's a lot of what-ifs. But this is the guy. For better or worse, he is a warrior. He goes out there, he tries to give this team and this fan base everything he has. But he is human. And I do question the decision-making here, whether it's the player, whether it's the team, of him coming back off that elbow injury. And now you're looking at missing him for a month because it has triggered, or again, I've used the word a few times here, exacerbated the wrist injury that he had from the fall. And then it also makes me wonder, all right, he was pain-free in December with the wrist. Did the pain come back around spring training? Did the pain come back leading into the season? And he's just been trying to gut it out. Because if that is the case, that's another issue, right? He's your most important player. He's your highly paid player. He's the face of the franchise. He's one of the faces of Major League Baseball. Like, it's kind of a big deal to not have him in your lineup for a month. I question a lot of things going on around this team. And, oh, by the way, it's not like there's a very easy fix here, right? Because while I don't dive into the Phillies a lot, especially on Mondays and Fridays, because I defer to Fighting Words, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Joy Media Network. While I usually defer to those guys, like I've been sitting back watching this team going, the outfield situation is dog shit. Left field, dog shit. Center field, dog shit. The fact that a team has supposedly come into a season with World Series aspirations, and they thought that a platoon of Marsh and Rojas was going to somehow figure it out, despite the fact that, like, there's been nothing to give us the belief that Johan Rojas was ever going to become a competent hitter or that Marsh was ever going to be more than a platoon player. They tried to trot that out again. They went and Kepler was the guy in left field, which I didn't understand at the time. I thought kind of felt like a bogus move. Okay, fine. Turner playing defense, not ideal. You have Stott, who has been woeful this season. So your two middle infielders have underperformed in the field. And Stott, I'd say probably, well, Stott defensively has been better than Turner has. But at the plate, Stott has not developed at all. He's regressed. And then you have this head case at third base in Alec Bohm, who has all the physical skills in the world, has all the physical tools, has the prototypical, you would expect, body of a legitimate hitter who just can't piece shit together. There are so many holes with this team. And they went into the season essentially running it back after running it back. And I openly questioned it last summer. And when the Phillies hit a hot streak early this season, right? Early. It was, Russ, remember how you said Dave Dombrowski really let the team down by not going out and making some higher name recognition signings? Remember how you denounced his offseason? How you feeling now? Feel the same way that I felt then. Prove it. Show me something. Show me anything. And at this point, the Phillies have shown you what they are. They are a very flawed team. The roster construction was a problem since opening day, and it's going to remain a legitimate issue. Oh, and by the way, I guess we'll find out if Jesus Luzardo can ever get himself back to being like a respectable number 3 starter, because the Cy Young candidacy is over. The All-Star candidacy is likely already over at this point. So you're looking at just trying to get that guy's head squared back on. And, oh, by the way, Aaron Nola's had injury concerns. That is also a problem. Ranger Suarez has had injury concerns of his own. That's also a problem. And, by the way, Zach Wheeler isn't going to pitch for another 7 years, so that's another legitimate issue. And you could be excited about Mick Abel. You could be excited about Andrew Painter, and that's fine. And listen, maybe you want to make the case to yourself that the Phillies should call up Crawford. They had to bring up Kemp because of the injury to Harper, but maybe you bring up Crawford, and maybe at some point you can shift somebody around. Do they look at Trey Turner in center field next season? Who the hell knows? There are very few things to be very excited about long-term with this Phillies team. And in the short term, I don't know how you look at the fan base. Like, they're in a weird spot. I know I'm all over the place, but this is frustrating. If you're the Phillies right now, right, you have to make a call either way. Because if Harper's out for a month, which I assume he will be, if Harper's out for a month and you have all these holes in the lineup and you have questions in the rotation, but especially the bullpen, right, you have all these holes. How many trades do you need to make to be a legitimately competitive team come October? Like, how many moves do you have to make? How many more impact players do you have to acquire to be a legitimate threat to make the playoffs, let alone try to compete for a World Series? Like, I don't even know. It feels like 3 moves, 4 moves. All right, well, who are you getting rid of? They've made Painter an untouchable. I can't imagine they want to trade Crawford. I can't imagine that Mick Abel's a name that they want to move right now. Now, he's done a lot to improve his value. Maybe he's the guy that you're willing to part with, but like, are you going to go back into what we expected of Dave Dombrowski, which is light the farm system on fire to make the Major League Baseball team a legitimate contender? He hasn't done it yet, to his credit. Like, is this the moment? Bryce Harper is out for at least 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe longer. All these holes, the bullpen still sucks. The rotation actually has question marks now, and the lineup's not particularly great. And the defense of the team is also kind of woeful. You put all that together, Is this the year that you want to then cash in on the prospects? Because I got to tell you, last year I felt like was a much better case for trading some of the players you might not have wanted to. I get it. If you really think the Painter is going to be a legitimate number one stud ace of a rotation, fine. Don't trade him. But last year, around the trade deadline, I was like, this is a very good team. Like, this is a team that if you add a couple of pieces, can take you to and maybe even win a World Series. I don't feel like that right now about this team. I feel like this team is one more injury away from bottoming out all the way. So are you really going to trade all the prospects now that you were unwilling to part with when you were a more competitive team? I'm not sure they are. And also, I don't even know if it's a good idea. But then how do you sell that to your fan base? Right? Like, you went cheap in the offseason. Was that John Middleton's decision? Was that Dave Dombrowski's decision? They went cheap this offseason. They didn't really make this team better. They did some lateral moves. They changed some bullpen pieces. They signed Max Kepler. But they didn't do a lot to make the team actually better. So then you kind of question, like, was the goal all along for them to even really compete this year? Do they have their eye on something next offseason? I don't know. It's a very weird place for them to be. And by the way, if they're not going to try to add, does that then make them a seller? Like, if they go into a spiral here over the next month while Harper's out, do they start selling off pieces? Because at that point, you know that the hope for the postseason is over. You'll know that this was a wasted season. And then, like, what exactly are you adding to the mix for 2026? That I don't know. So going back to the person's comment from before about, like, oh, I'm worried that this Bryce Harper thing is becoming Embiid 2.0. We can look at what happened with the Sixers this year and what has happened so far with the Phillies. And, like, there are certainly some parallels to draw. There are. Now, in fairness, we knew with the Sixers situation, you were adding a guy with a significant injury history in Paul George. You knew that you had a massive injury question in Joel Embiid, but you also knew that, like, if that team could stay relatively healthy, they would have been a top 4 team in the East. This Phillies team had everything kind of break in their way to win the NL East, and the Mets got better. The Braves have really fallen off. This should be a season that you could win the NL East, but they've had so many guys underperform this year, and I haven't seen any real indications that guys that you need to improve, Stott, Marsh, Rojas, Bohm, are going to do that. And I'm certainly not convinced the bullpen is going to be very good. I'm certainly not convinced that an Aaron Nola returning to the rotation is going to find his former, like, number one opening day starter form. I'm not positive about that at all. I don't know. They're in a weird spot. And it sucks because I do like baseball. I don't like bad baseball, but I like baseball. And the idea of, like, seeing this team fall out of it in June would suck. I think the summers actually feel a lot less fun when the Phillies aren't a good team. It is a bummer, though. It feels like a real drag. 1-9 in their last 10. It's brutal. All right, I'm going to go over to the comments here, and then we're going to turn the page and maybe find a little bit of positivity here outside of the Fightin' Phils, or the Fightless Phils. Should we start calling them the Fightless Phils? That's the other thing, too. I was listening to Fightin' Words this morning, and they were talking about how, you know, Rob Thompson's kind of fallback cliche is that, you know, guys might be trying to do too much. Like, they were trying, the idea here that there are grown-ass men in this rotation, or in this lineup, that can't figure out what their role should be without Bryce Harper. That if he's not there, they don't know what to do. They're gripping the bat too tight. They're having a hard time. They're having a hard time figuring out how to compensate without Bryce Harper. Like, grow the fuck up. You get paid a lot of money. Figure it out. If the hitting coach has to get changed, change the hitting coach. They have to figure something out. Like, legitimately, I do feel like they are on the precipice of potentially falling off. It's really bad.